get the warning out while we still have time. This is the Light of Truth radio broadcast with Michael Boldea.
All right, welcome to the program and thank you for joining us. This is the Light of Truth radio broadcast. I am your host, Michael Boldea, and I want to thank you for joining us. We are live this week as of 2/28/2019. So if you are hearing this at a later date, we are no longer live. I know last week we had a recording, and boy, has it been a very entertaining week. Full of intrigue, full of nonsense, and full of the things that reaffirm in my mind that we have become a banana republic. And that is a bit scary to me because I've got kids. Those of you that don't have children might not understand why everything that I talk about is through the prism of my daughters. Well, it's because I will not be here forever. My time is limited. I got, maybe a good 10, 15 years left. And then my daughters come into adulthood, and they have to live in the world that we leave behind. And so, yes, I am concerned about what I'm seeing occurring and taking place in these United States of America. I'm concerned about the fact that communists are no longer hiding in the shadows. They're no longer trying to convince others that they're not communists. They're open about it. They're nakedly embracing the idea of communism, of socialism, of Marxism, of taking from others who have earned and giving to those who choose not to labor. And what they will soon find out is that when you take men's incentives to labor, they'll just stop laboring. So the question is this: if nobody's working and nobody's earning and there's nobody to take from, pray tell, what will you do? But that's just one small thing in a grander sort of puzzle that we're seeing come together globally, even worldwide, not just in America. I think what's happening to Benjamin Netanyahu is very important. I think that the globalists within his government, just like the globalists within our government, have decided that this is the perfect time to strike, and they're trying to either muddy the man to the point that he cannot make himself clean even though he proves every allegation to be false, sort of like a Donald Trump of Israel, if you will. Because this is what's happening to the man. Look, this week it was demonstrably proven that there was no Russian collusion. This great hope of the Democrat Party and of the anti-Trump movement, the never-Trumpers, even within the Republican contingent, they realized what they had on their hands was a big old goose egg. The man whom they thought would peel back the layers, would peel back the curtain, and we would all see the depravity of one Donald J. Trump and his collusion with the Russians, didn't follow through. Nothing came of it. All the giddy folk who were building the gallows for Donald Trump got deflated pretty quickly. Because if there's no there, there's no there. Now, I need you to sort of notice a pattern here. For the past 2 years, they've hopscotched from one thing to another when the one thing they were betting on to bring down the Trump presidency didn't materialize. So they went from Russian collusion to illegal campaign finance. Now they're hinging their hopes on some sort of secret investigation by the New York State's attorney or some other nonsense that's going to bring nothing. And yet none of these people who have for 2 years beaten the drum of Russian collusion to the point that you just have to turn off the news are going to be held to account. The man is innocent. They've made him out to be Hitler. They've called him Hitler. And the man is innocent of the things that they accused him of. Apparently, that's just flying over the heads of everyone in the media. So, yes, this week was, I guess, disbarred attorney's Michael Cohen's moment to shine. And he fell short of Democrat expectations. But I need you to see the pattern here, because I remember talking about this back during the first summit with North Korea. Do you remember that same week when Trump was meeting with Kim Jong-un and they were talking denuclearization? Do you remember the thing that happened back then? Somebody leaked something from the Mueller report that took the oxygen out of the meeting. Same thing happened this time. They knew that this had been planned. They knew that Trump was going to go and meet with Kim Jong-un. They knew about the summit. And this is the week they chose for this farce. This is the week they chose to bring out a man who's slimier than a snail, who's going to prison, who he himself said will not negate, will not deny the existence of a book deal, a movie deal, and whatever else. And they were hoping that he'd say something really bombastic, that the floor would drop from beneath Trump, that things would be just torn asunder. None of it happened, but it still distracted from the summit, and apparently no decision was reached. Now, nothing that these vile creatures do is accidental. This is one of the things that you need to understand. I know Maxine Waters is monosyllabic. Nancy Pelosi seems to have had one too many strokes, and she's having a hard time putting a sentence together. A couple other people in Congress that I have no clue how they tie their shoes in the morning somehow got elected to one of the highest offices in the land. But dumb as they might be, mentally deficient as they might be, make no mistake, they don't do anything accidentally. They did this on purpose. So, if you follow this thread to its rightful conclusion, if you look at the pinball bouncing from one place to another until it finally stops, you have to conclude that the Democratic members of the U.S. Congress care more about bringing down Trump, or at least embarrassing him, than they do about the national security of these United States. Let that sink in. These are elected officials who cared not a whit that this was a very important week for these United States, and that we could finally end hostilities between North and South Korea, and that we might even have the opportunity to at least make progress in denuclearization. Nope, don't care. Because one thing you have to understand about the Democrat Party is that they would rather rule over rubble than be out of power. Let that one sink in too. Look, it's time to take the gloves off and call this thing what it is. Everyone from this Rashida Tlaib, who is the new face of the Democrat Party in Congress, who's an open racist and anti-Semite, she got elected to office. So did the other burqa-wearing one from Minnesota. Because we fell for their nonsense that diversity is our strength. Just you wait. Just you wait until Rashida and her ilk get complete power. Then you'll see their tolerance. Then you'll see their all-inclusiveness. Then you'll see their push for diversity. Look, sometimes I sit and think that we're so foolish regarding what's before our very eyes that we deserve to be destroyed. We deserve to be conquered by people who are mental midgets. Because we're unwilling to stand up and say, this is lunacy. We're unwilling to stand up and say, this is wrong. We're unwilling to stand up and say, hey there, you're speaking lies. Shut up, sit down. And as is the case, every single time the Democrat Party goes up to bat, once again, I think they've overplayed their hand. Very likely as horribly as they overplayed the whole Kavanaugh situation. Because even people who have no love for Donald Trump that I've spoken to are disgusted by the banana republic that our Congress has become. God forbid we give these people complete power. Because then you will know what it is to suffer. Please believe me. Then you will know what it is to do without. And they will carry out their plans mercilessly. Because they don't care how many eggs get broken, as long as they get to eat the omelet. So, we're going to tie all this together, because while the Trump administration is under fire by the globalists here in the United States, something similar is happening in Israel. And Benjamin Netanyahu is under attack. Please understand that the people who are attempting to undo, to destroy, to tear down aren't Democrats or Republicans. The battle is between nationalists and globalists. If you believe in national sovereignty, if you believe in borders, if you believe that being a citizen of a certain nation actually means something, then you are the enemy of the globalist. The globalist doesn't care. Open borders, free for all. The fact that within 5 years this whole thing will collapse and we'll be hunting rats like they do in Venezuela just to feed our kids, they don't process that. They don't care. Because they're zealots. They're true believers. Again, they don't care how many eggs get broken if they get to eat the omelet. So, let's go through a little bit of what is happening to Bibi Netanyahu. Because it's just as wicked as what has been happening to Donald Trump over these past 2 years. Again, definitive proof that there was no collusion, the whole thing that they based their entire attack on. And here you have Attorney General Abishai Mandelblit announcing Thursday that Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu will be indicted for bribery in a decision that will rock the country a mere 6 weeks prior to the general elections. Again, you need to be wise as a serpent. Take a step back and look at timing. Every time something happens, look at timing. This is happening 6 weeks prior to the general election. Every time there was a bombshell about Russia, which turned out to be a dud, it happened while Trump was away at some summit, something very important that could change the face of the world. Again, there are no accidents. These things are thoroughly planned out. The fact that Bibi Netanyahu is getting indicted 6 weeks prior to the general election is not an accident. By the time this whole thing boils over and his innocence is obvious, the elections will have come and gone, and perhaps enough people will have doubts sown into their minds where they'll either stay home or vote for the other guy. Now, Mandelblit will charge the Prime Minister pending a hearing for bribery, fraud, and breach of trust in the so-called Case 4000, a corruption case involving the national phone company Bezek. Netanyahu will also be indicted for breach of trust in Case 1000 for receiving illicit gifts, and with fraud and breach of trust in Case 2000, which Netanyahu is suspected of striking a deal with media mogul Arnon Noni Moses. The decision marks the first time in Israel's history that a sitting prime minister has been informed that he is to face criminal charges. Former Prime Minister Ehud Olmert, who served time in prison, stepped down during a 2008 investigation into him before an indictment was announced. This is hugely significant for the Prime Minister and for all of us. The Times of Israel quoted Susie Navat, a professor of constitutional and parliamentary law. This was an investigation conducted with caution, with restraint. Yes, of course it was. All of them are, aren't they? Every time the good guys are investigated, it's done with restraint and it's done with caution. And even though there's no evidence, you move ahead, you push forward, because there's an agenda. Now, apparently, Bill Clinton could rape a bunch of women. Hillary Clinton could be responsible for the death of untold dozens. Doesn't matter. But hey, we have someone who said they saw someone who saw someone believing that Donald Trump was in Moscow. And they put together a dossier. And for 2 years, we heard about this. Same thing here, I promise you. The whole nonsense about the evidence being checked and rechecked is ludicrous. The move could turn tables for Netanyahu's Likud party, which is currently running neck and neck with political newcomer and ex-IDF chief Benny Gantz's Blue and White Party, according to polls. Netanyahu's party responded that there is nothing to the cases against the premier and continued with the party line that the media and the left pressured the attorney general into the decision. That is true. That is what happened. Because the media apparently, due to the fact that they cannot be sued for libel, have taken it upon themselves to try to steer national politics the way they want it to go. And the one thing that is painfully obvious is that 80, 90, 95% of all media is made up of pederasts and homosexuals and nihilists and globalists and people who should be in prison or hung for treason. Now, Netanyahu's party's statement continues and it says, no one is surprised by the announcement. The witch hunt against the prime minister began with an attempt to hit him with 4 bribery cases. Even before the hearing, 3 of those have collapsed. Netanyahu is slated to give a media briefing later on Thursday. As of yet, he has not given that briefing, but what can he do but deny? Same thing that happened to Donald Trump when he got accused of Russian collusion and Robert Mueller got appointed as the special counsel because we got to dig. Never mind that there's more evidence that the Hillary camp colluded with the Russians than Donald Trump. Nope, we're not seeing that. La. We don't care about that because we have an agenda. It's that simple. It always has been. And somehow the American people still fall for it, and they don't demand that reporters and news outlets be held to account for the things that they report and for the fallacies that they regurgitate as truth. Now, since I was gone last week, the one thing that we missed talking about is the fact that there is or was a meeting on clerical sex abuse by the Pope himself that took place in the Vatican. So you can imagine the pressure that the Vatican was under to actually do this, because they had absolutely no desire to open up this particular can of worms. But the pressure was such where they had to throw some red meat to the populace, to their loyal followers. Otherwise, it would have gotten a lot worse. Anyway, February 21st, which is a week ago, cloistered inside the Vatican, Roman Catholic Church leaders heard searing pre-recorded videos, testimonials, and audio from abuse survivors, including one made pregnant 3 times by a priest who started abusing her at age 15, beat her, and forced her to have abortions. Yes, it's the Protestants that are evil. Oh, you evil, evil Christians. You stand outside abortion clinics and tell pregnant women who are about to go in and kill their babies that there are other options. How dare you? How dare you? Isn't that what the Pope was alluding to some weeks back? Huh? One of his priests made a girl pregnant 3 times, which he started abusing at the age of 15, and threw in a few beatings for good measure. But yes, we Protestants, we are the evil that shall not be named. Victims need to be believed, another person pleaded by video, urging bishops and other church leaders to work with civil authorities to hold sexually deviant clerics accountable. I said this 3 weeks ago. Turn over the files, let them go to prison, and let them suffer the consequences of their actions. Deplorable human beings, pustules of society, wearing clerical robes. Outside the Vatican walls, clusters of people who have suffered abuse in the Catholic Church hovered near news conferences, gave hours' worth of interviews, observed vigils, and planned a Saturday march. Many expressed exasperation and little optimism that an extraordinary 4-day meeting of bishops and other participants convened by Pope Francis to grapple with clerical child sexual abuse would lead to even basic changes. They have a right to express little optimism because they've known about this for years, decades even. They knew what was happening. This is not a mystery. This is not an, oh my, I never knew this. They knew these things were happening. They covered it up. They protected pedophiles. They victimized victims over and over again by not believing them or giving them credence. This is what has been happening in the Catholic Church. So, I'm sorry, Il Papi, but global warming really isn't the biggest problem you've got at this juncture, is it? Same old, said Tim Law, president of a survivor support group called Ending Clergy Abuse. For 6 years of his papacy, he has said, zero tolerance, zero tolerance. He added, he's backed down. The scenes punctuated the enormous pressures on the Pope to forcefully address priestly sexual abuse, a scourge that has for decades devastated some areas of his vast church, while in others it has been utterly ignored and denied. The word that you need to let crystallize in your mind is decades. That means tens of years. Again, this has been happening. It is undeniable. And the people who have been responsible for destroying lives of innocent children have as yet to be held to account. I'm sorry, defrocking a pervert after he's raped hundreds of children, not enough of a punishment. The meeting was potentially a consequential moment for this papacy, and the most visible step taken by the Vatican to impress upon bishops and other church leaders the enormity of a crisis that has shaken the faithful. You don't need to have a confab with your priests to impress upon them that it's bad to rape kids. Sorry, not sorry. If you think that the Pope needed to have a confab with his priests to reaffirm that sexually abusing children, that raping children, that destroying innocence is not good, then I don't know what to say. Expectations for action were amplified by victims and victim advocates who converged in Rome to apply pressure from outside the meeting, which took place in a Holy See conference hall. Priest sex abuse scandals have repeatedly emerged around the world, even decades after the problem first came to light in the United States, where the systemic shuffling of predatory priests from parish to parish spread abuse like a virus. Again, they knew and they protected pedophiles. They knew and they protected serial child sex abusers. If enough complaints came down the pike, hey, we'll just take this pervert and move him to another parish so he can rape new kids on you. Can you imagine? Just think of the grotesqueness of this. Just for a second, I know you're going to need a shower after because I already do. But think how grotesque this whole thing is. You have people in spiritual authority over other people abusing their children sexually. And eventually, it's found out. And instead of saying, hey, police, we have a former priest who's been defrocked who needs to go to prison. Experienced sexual abuse himself. Instead of doing that, They took the pedophilic rapist and they moved them to another parish. And guess what he did when he got there? New prey. Fresh. Again, it baffles the mind how grotesque this thing is. Rather than turn them over, you protect them? You have parishioners who come with the expectation of being spiritually nurtured, and what they get is their kids raped and destroyed? Committing suicide and turning to drugs just to take the edge off the pain that they're suffering at the hands of your priests? The issue has drastically devalued the moral authority that is the currency of the clergy and Pope Francis. You don't say. I never saw that one coming. Really? Has it drastically devalued the moral authority of Il Papa, who just a few weeks ago said the biggest threat to humanity is climate change? I would surmise, dear sir, that perhaps your priests raping children a bit higher on the scale than non-existent climate change. Let's deal with that first, and then we'll swing back around to global warming and climate change. How about that? Send a few of the perverts to prison. Defrock them. Expose them. Put their pictures on the front page of every newspaper in the state where they're perishing. And when that's done with, maybe we shall discuss climate change. So yes, I would say that the issue has drastically devalued the moral authority that is the currency of the clergy and Pope Francis. See, and this is where reporting gets skewed, because the entire sentence of this article is this: the issue has drastically devalued the moral authority that is the currency of the clergy and Pope Francis, who is often a lonely voice in support of migrants and the poor. Well, if I were, someone who wouldn't think the best of people, I'd say that the reason he's so often the lonely voice in support of migrants and the poor is because they're the easiest prey. Easiest ones to abuse are the poor and the migrants. But hey, that's just me being silly. As the abuse crisis has festered, critics have asked why anyone should listen to a moral leader unable or unwilling to clean up his house. Ding, ding, ding. Winner, winner, chicken dinner. Because it's not him being unable. It's him being unwilling. Now, I understand they've run the numbers and they realize that, I don't know, maybe half of the Catholic dioceses in the world would remain without priests if they all got exposed at once. But what does that say about you? When you're willing to let children suffer, you're willing to let children be abused, you're willing to let children forever be destroyed in mind and spirit. just to save face or prop up the church. He's not a moral leader who is unable to clean up his own house. He is a moral leader who is unwilling to clean up his own house. On Thursday, addressing the 190 Catholic Church leaders who had gathered from around the world, the Pope sought to reassure his flock that we hear the cry of the little ones asking for justice. Really? Just now? Not over the decades? Not for the 6 years you've been in office? No, just now. Because people are beginning to, get sick and tired of their kids being abused. Just now you're hearing the cry of the little ones asking for justice. Such magnanimity. We hear the cry of the little ones asking for justice. You hear the footsteps of your parishioners leaving your church as though it was on fire. That's what you're hearing. And that's what you're fearing. Because I don't know many Catholics, but I don't know how you reconcile being a Catholic after all of this has come out. I don't know how you reconcile giving your money to something that has systematically protected child molesters for decades. Now, recently there's been articles that have come out that, the New York diocese may have to declare bankruptcy with all the lawsuits. Good! They should go bankrupt. They should be penniless. Because you don't get to rape children and get away with it. At least you shouldn't. Still, despite his acknowledgement that people expect from us not obvious and simple condemnations, but concrete and effective measures, he offered remedies that disappointed many victims. Instead, Francis, who has said he intended the meeting to be a catharsis, educating bishops and religious leaders so they would undergo a conversion of spirit on the severity of the crisis, provided those assembled with 21 reflection points. They are a roadmap to our discussion. Archbishop Charles Scicluna, the Vatican's leading sex crimes investigators, said at a news conference, there don't need to be no 21 reflection points, as someone would say in Kentucky. You need one reflection point, stop raping kids. How about that? 21 reflection points, really? Stop molesting children. Turn those who have over to the police. All right, 2 reflection points. They included deciding that priests and bishops found guilty of abuse should be dismissed from public ministry, but fell short of what most advocates consider zero tolerance, the automatic dismissal from the clerical state. So this is the best they got. Of the 21 reflection points, the best they could come up with is that those who were found guilty of abuse of children should be dismissed from public ministry, But not from the clerical state, because let's not jump the shark. Let's not exaggerate here. Kind of monsters are leading the Catholic Church today. Honestly, this is beyond ludicrous. This is beyond stomach churning. What sort of ghouls are in control of Catholicism? You have to take it on a case-by-case basis, Archbishop Scaluna said, promising no blanket remedies. I'm sorry, if you're found guilty of abusing a child, there should be a blanket remedy. Don't you think? Don't you think there should be a blanket remedy if you're found guilty of sexually abusing a child? Well, apparently Archbishop Scaluna doesn't think so. Advocates for other victims of abuse and secrecy in the church, including for children of priests and for nuns raped by clerics, also came to Rome to meet with top officials and take advantage of the intense media interest. The meeting itself included the presidents of many of the world's bishops, conferences, men's and women's religious orders, and powerful cardinals from Francis's committee of top advisors. The Pope, who had initially inspired hopes for action after his election in 2013, placed himself in the ranks of abuse skeptics early last year when he accused victims of slandering bishops during a trip to Chile. That was a fun one, wasn't it? Everybody thought that the previous Pope was just mean and left because, he was bitter. I'm starting to have a change of heart about him. I think he uncovered what was going on. And he realized it's such a worm-filled carcass. It's so full of maggots and pus that the only thing you can do is burn it. And he knew he wouldn't be able to. And so he just walked away. The outcry from victims was fast and furious. Criticism reached a fever pitch last summer when the Pennsylvania Attorney General released a scathing grand jury report. And prelates in Francis's own hierarchy also accused him of covering up for abusers. Since last year, Francis has undergone something of a conversion on the issue, admitting errors, asking forgiveness, and toughening his stance towards those who covered up the crimes. He has pushed out bishops in Chile and last week defrocked the American former Cardinal Theodore McCarrick. Francis called for the 4-day meeting at the Vatican last September with the apparent aim of relieving some pressure, but it also increased expectations. Some bishops have long denied that clerical sex abuse was a problem, or suggested that it existed only in the Anglo-Saxon world or was a result of homosexuality in the church, a contention discredited by most scientific studies. Now, when bishops have acknowledged abuse, they often treat it as a sin to forgive rather than a crime to prosecute. Well, this is where they're wrong. It's both. Sorry, it's both. If you abuse a child, not only is it a sin, but it is a crime that must be prosecuted. And the individual guilty of said crime must be punished to the fullest extent of the law. If we cannot protect our innocent, if we cannot protect our defenseless, then we are not a society worth saving. After the Pope spoke, the Holy See, the assembled bishops, watched video presentations of testimony from victims who were not identified to the news media. It was an exercise in spreading the word that the abuses were real. The first thing they did was to treat me as a liar, turn their back on me, and tell me that I and others were enemies of the church, one victim apparently from Chile said of church leaders. This pattern exists not only in Chile, the victim added, it exists all over the world, and this must end. A 53-year-old priest also addressed the conference on a pre-recorded video and recounted his own abuse by another priest. Let that sink in. One victim spoke of being sexually molested more than 100 times and of having the abuse covered up by religious superiors. I'll request the bishops to get their act clear because this is one of the time bombs happening in the Church of Asia, the victim said. Cardinal Luis Antonio Tagle of the Philippines, widely considered a contender to succeed Francis as Pope, also addressed the gathering. Wounds have been inflicted by us bishops that must be faced, said Cardinal Tagle, who has also come under criticism from victims groups for his apparent lack of commitment to zero tolerance policies. Again, don't give me the wounds have been inflicted by us bishops if you're unwilling to turn those bishops who inflicted wounds over to the authorities. No. God does not approve of this. Don't give me, he sought to balance the faith's belief and unconditional love for those who have done wrong with the need of justice for the victims. See, that's the thing that irks me the most, is when you try to use the Word of God and the unconditional love of God to justify child rapists. The emphasis on mercy was in keeping with Pope Francis's own past remarks and the concerns of many bishops who fear that clergy members are being unfairly targeted. No, you're not being unfairly targeted if you're a child rapist. If you molest children, your targeting is not unfair. It is wholly fair. Perfectly fair, more than fair. But such suggestions were likely to enrage victims groups who have grown tired of abstract responses filled with biblical allegory and demand concrete solutions. Archbishop Saluna, the Vatican sex crimes investigator, argued that the Pope's reflections points were very, very concrete. Were they? No public ministry, but hey, you're still in the club. This is just insane. This is what's happening. This is what's happening in a place that calls itself the church. Unbelievable. So basically nothing happened. They got together because they needed to relieve a little pressure that was coming from the parishioners, but by their entire conversation, by their entire press release, there was no concrete change. So there you go. That is what happened last week. And you wonder why the church doesn't have moral authority? Because the man who's supposed to be the emissary of God himself will not unequivocally condemn child abusers. The man who's supposed to be the emissary of God himself will not come out and say unequivocally that these people need to be handed over to the police. They need to be prosecuted, and they need to go to prison for a very long time. So yes, next time you hear Il Papi waxing poetic on the poor and the downtrodden, next time you hear Il Papi going on and on about global warming and climate change, just remember, he is not so vociferous in the defense of child victims. He is not so vociferous in his condemnation of priests who abuse said children. He's not so vociferous when it comes to condemning pedophiles and perverts. So, spare me the climate change or the global warming, because real human beings are suffering under your watch. Real innocence is being destroyed. Real lives are being shipwrecked. So the next time you think of condemning people who want walls around their nation or who want sovereignty, spare me, Il Papi. Just spare me. When I hear that the Vatican, surrounded by its very large, very thick walls, has decided to hand over a list of every pedophile priest to the authorities, then we can go on to discussing other things. Until then, por favore, as they would say in Italy, spare me. So, a lot more to talk about, but we've run out of time, kids. It's been one of those brutal weeks where you're just wondering where humanity's going, and you already know the answer, but you're hoping against hope that it's not true. Anyway, thank you all for listening. Thank you for being with us. May God bless you. May God keep you. And I'm sure Gino can fill the next 5 minutes because he's got a few things to tell you. God bless you. And Lord willing, we will see you next week.
Thank you, Mike. Well, today was our Stand for Life Day for the preborn. And you never know how many people will get on board something fairly new. But a couple of reasons that we decided to do this was, number one, we as evangelicals need to come together and stand for life. And although the Catholic Church has had events surrounded about pro-life things, which are good, as you heard Mike for the last hour, they've got a lot of issues in their own house that need cleaning up. And we feel as children of the cross, we should be on the forefront of standing for what's right in front of the Lord. So I want to say today that gladly, from an event that was put together in less than 2 months, I would say we had many more people than we thought participate, and churches and individuals. We literally took today as a day of prayer and fasting for life, preborn life. You could include the elderly with that. You could include standing for life and against sex trafficking and a host of other things. And in general, we made our focus on the preborn, but the turnout was good. People have, in the last week or 2 or 3 weeks, from churches in many states have been saying, you know what, I heard about this and we're going to join in. And you might say, well, what does one day of prayer and fasting do? It does a lot. When people pray, God hears us. And when we seek the Lord, we will find him. And so by calling on the Lord, I believe we have started to touch heaven with a very, very important moral situation as abortion, and I believe God will work, as he has done in our county, where we had these strip clubs that mostly are shut down now, other than one that's holding on by a thread. And that soon will be shut down as well, we believe. Those did not shut down until we started having a prayer night in Dodge County. So if my people called by my name humble themselves, turn from their wicked ways and seek my face, then I will hear from heaven and what? Heal their land. And so it's very important to pray. And in the next few months, we will continue to get the word about our yearly Stand for Life event on February 28th. It seems to be a significant date, as it's been a day in the past where presidents have called for prayer for various things in the history of America. And we will go from here, and when it gets a bit warmer out, we will encourage people in different states to go and pray in front of one of their clinics and to ask God to start shutting them down on a great level. So thank you all for standing for life. Several of you listening tonight participated, and the reports have been good. And you know what? We're a small voice that will turn into a bigger voice. And as we pray and come together, that will open the door to actually doing something about the situation and motivating and mobilizing the church to be proactive. So God bless you so much. Thank you for tuning in tonight. We will try to put the program up on YouTube tomorrow. Have a great night.
Thank you for listening to today's broadcast, The Light of Truth with Michael Boldea. If you would like to order a copy of today's broadcast, please visit our website at handofhelp.com. If you have questions about our ministry, you can email us at handofhelpoffice@aol.com or simply call us at 920-206-9910. God bless you.